Hey everyone, I'm your author June. Before we get started, I really would appreciate it if everyone could hit the subscribe button. It helps me grow the channel, and I would love for all of you to come on this journey with me, as a family. Now, let's get into the story. Let me know if you enjoy. The lawyer's office reeked of aged documents and a cloying citrus scent, an odd combination that did little to calm Jesse's jangled nerves. Perched on the edge of a stiff leather chair, he faced Doc Henley, the town's legal authority. Sunlight poured through the window, each mote of dust a fleeting second ticking away. A restless shift sent the chair groaning in protest. He'd rather be branding cattle than enduring this. The will promised the Broken Spur, plain and simple, a birthright fulfilled. Instead, a cold dread coiled in his stomach. Doc Henley cleared his throat, his expression compassionate yet resolute. "Jesse, your uncle was precise. I am obligated to follow his directives." He adjusted his spectacles, magnifying the creases of concern etched around his eyes. The legal jargon droned on, a river of words washing over Jesse, who was focused on the buried hook, the reason for his unease. At last, Doc Henley arrived at the crux. He hesitated, an almost pitying glance directed at Jesse. "Contingent upon the aforementioned Jesse Rawlins entering into legal matrimony within 30 days of this reading. Failure to comply will result in the complete sale of the Broken Spur Ranch at auction, with proceeds benefiting the Society for the Preservation of Desert Tortoises." The pronouncement landed like a thunderclap in the small office. Jesse could only stare. "Married? To get the ranch he wants me shackled?" Henley offered a somber nod. "His explicit desire, Jesse. I understand it's unconventional." Unconventional was an understatement bordering on the insane. A surge of raw anger coursed through him. His uncle, even from beyond the grave, still pulled the strings. 30 days. 30 days to lasso a bride or lose everything. The Broken Spur was more than just acreage. It was his heritage, his destiny, the anchor of his existence. He bolted to his feet, the chair screeching against the floorboards. "This is madness." He knew I'm not the marrying kind. "Your uncle was a multifaceted individual, Jesse." Perhaps he surmised he. Henley's voice trailed off, searching for suitable phrasing. "That you were missing something." Jesse's scoff echoed bitterly in the room. "I need the Broken Spur. It's the only thing I've ever needed." He spun on his heel and stormed from the office, the slamming door punctuating his fury. Out by the corral, Hank Miller was tending to the horses. Loyal and taciturn, Hank was practically family. More than a ranch hand, he was a confidant, the one soul Jesse truly confided in. "Trouble brewing, Jesse?" Hank inquired, noting the storm on Jesse's face. "Trouble? Hank, this is a full-blown tempest!" Jesse exploded, pacing agitatedly. He recounted the will's stipulations, the ludicrous marriage demand, the looming specter of ruin. Hank listened with unwavering composure. When Jesse's tirade subsided, Hank offered, "Well, that throws a wrench in the works." "A wrench?" "This is a full-scale disaster. 30 days. Where in tarnation am I supposed to conjure up a wife in 30 days? Jesse threw his hands up in despair. "I barely know any women." Hank pondered this, then spat a dark stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "Sarah May down at the Mercantile's been sweet on you for ages." Jesse visibly recoiled. "Sarah May is kind, but she's not wife material. Besides, she deserves someone who loves her, not some desperado trying to save his skin." The thought of Sarah May's hopeful gaze turning to ashes gnawed at him. He couldn't exploit her that way. He couldn't use anyone like that. He leaned against the weathered fence, his gaze sweeping across the ranch's sprawling expanse. The land unfolded before him, a tapestry of emerald and gold beneath an endless sky. Beautiful, untamed, unforgiving, a mirror of himself. He'd wrestled tooth and nail to protect it from drought, from debt, from the crushing weight of solitude. Now, he faced an unparalleled trial. There has to be another option, he muttered, mostly to himself. Maybe there is, Hank replied slowly, his gaze narrowed in thought. But time's slippin', Jesse. You need to figure something out, and quick. Jesse knew Hank spoke the truth. 30 days. It wasn't just about the ranch. It was about his lineage, his history, his very essence. He refused to let it all crumble. He had to unearth a solution, by any means necessary, to appease his uncle's bizarre wishes. He pushed himself off the fence, his jaw hardening with grim resolve. He would comb every town, every settlement, every forgotten corner of this territory if that's what it took. He would find a wife. It wouldn't be a love story, that was certain. It would be a transaction, a means to survival, but it would save the Broken Spur. And that was all that mattered. Or so he kept repeating to himself. A proposition in the saloon's stale air, thick with cigarette fumes, clung to Jesse as he observed Annie's final song. The vibrant timbre of her voice, usually so captivating, felt subdued, its edges roughened like aged leather. He noticed the droop in her posture during her bow, the forced nature of her smile. The pianist, a stout fellow crowned with a bushy mustache, gave her a fleeting, unspoken solace with a pat on the arm. Rosie, ever watchful, intercepted Jesse's approach. "Business or pleasure, Rawlins? Admiring the songbird?" Her sharp gaze missed nothing. "Neither, Rosie," Jesse rasped. "I need a word with Annie, alone." Rosie scrutinized him, her face an inscrutable mask. Finally, a curt nod. 5 minutes. It's been a long haul for her. She moved to the bar, refilling glasses with deliberate precision, a silent warning etched into each movement. Jesse remained rooted, his boots stirring the sawdust scattered across the floor. He carried the weight of the land agreement in his pocket, the impossible condition looming over him, a hanging blade. He hadn't known real sleep in days, the potential loss of the ranch chewing at his insides. When Rosie signaled permission, Jesse moved toward Annie. She was wiping down the mahogany, her complexion ashen in the muted light. "Annie?" he murmured, his voice struggling against the saloon's clamor. She started, glancing up. "Jesse, what brings you here?" A guardedness flickered in her eyes, a caution he understood. He hesitated, the words caught in his windpipe. This felt deeply wrong, intrinsically flawed. But the ranch was everything. "I need to ask something of you. Something unusual." She placed the rag aside, leaning against the bar, arms folded. "Unusual is my current reality. Shoot." He inhaled deeply. "I need to marry, within 30 days. Annie's brows arched skyward. "Well, that's certainly upfront. Congratulations, perhaps? Or do you require a cake baker?" He grimaced. "It's not that kind of celebration. It's a stipulation in my uncle's will. I need to be wedded to inherit the Broken Spur." Her face softened, a glimmer of comprehension. "The Broken Spur? Quite the inheritance." "My whole world," he said, his voice thick with desperation. "And I stand to lose it all." Silence descended, punctuated only by the clinking of glass and snippets of conversations. He felt the weight of her evaluation, her silent judgment. At last, she spoke, her voice a low current. "And why are you telling me this?" He swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it difficult. I'm asking you to wed me, Annie." The quiet stretched, deafening. Annie stared, her lips slightly parted in disbelief. "Marry you?" she echoed, her tone devoid of inflection. "You're asking me, a saloon singer you barely know, to marry you to safeguard your family's legacy?" He nodded, shame blooming in his chest. "It would be a formality, a legal agreement, nothing more, strictly business." Annie gave a short, mirthless laugh. "A transaction? Is that how you perceive me, Jessie? A trinket to be traded for your desires?" "No," he exclaimed, his voice gaining volume. "That's not what I meant. I respect you, Annie. I wouldn't ask unless I believed you possessed the strength to bear it." "Strength?" she scoffed. "I'm strong enough to charm coins from drunken cowboys just to keep a roof above me. Strong enough to swallow the crumbs of this town. But I draw the line at marrying a man who views me as merely a solution to his predicament." He closed the distance between them, his voice pleading. "I understand it's a significant request, but I can offer you stability, a home far from this existence." Her eyes narrowed to slits. "And your gain, Jessie, beyond saving the ranch? What happens once the 30 days have passed? Do you simply cast me aside?" He averted his eyes, unable to sustain her gaze. "We can address that later. We can. "What, Jessie?" she pressed, a hard edge to her words. "Perpetuate this lie? Pretend this charade is something genuine? I've endured enough deception for 10 lifetimes." He looked back, his heart aching with a dull throb. He saw the fatigue shadowing her eyes, the delicate vulnerabilities she struggled to conceal. And he knew, with a sinking certainty, that he was demanding far too much. I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely audible. I can't bear the thought of losing the ranch." Annie sighed, raking her fingers through her tresses. "Jessie," she said softly, "the ranch isn't the only thing at stake. You're risking my heart, and I fear that's a gamble neither of us can afford to take." The air congealed after Jessie's proposition, heavy as a humid summer. Night. Annie agitated the amber liquid in her glass. The honky-tonk piano, usually a comfort, felt muffled, remote. By the door, Rosie remained a vigilant guardian, her gaze like sharpened steel. Jessie shifted, the bar's worn wood biting into his forearms. He hadn't anticipated applause, but the palpable distrust emanating from the women felt like a lead apron. Finally, Annie placed her glass down, the faint chime amplified by a sudden hush in the nearby chatter. "Marriage," she uttered, the word leaving a bitter aftertaste. "A high price for shelter." Jessie's shoulders drew taut. "It's no picnic for me either, Miss Sinclair. You think I relish this? I have to." He raked a hand through his hair, the lines of fatigue deepening on his face. "That ranch, it's the last vestige of my family." Annie studied him, her expression inscrutable. She discerned, beneath the gruff facade, the raw desperation flickering in his eyes. A man cornered, willing to bargain away his dignity for something he treasured. And in that plight, she glimpsed a reflection of her own. "What manner of arrangement are we discussing, Mr. Rawlins?" she inquired, the sharp edge fading from her voice, replaced by a tentative curiosity. He hesitated, the truth a hard pill to swallow. "In name only. We present a united front for appearance's sake, until the legalities are settled. A year, give or take. Then we can pursue our individual paths. Rosie scoffed. And what's to prevent you from discarding her once you've secured your claim, leaving her destitute? Jessie met Rosie's unwavering stare. My word, that's all I can pledge. He returned his attention to Annie. I will provide handsomely, of course. Accommodation, attire, sustenance, whatever you require. Annie rose, her gaze encompassing the saloon, the accumulated grime, the reek of stale beer, the incessant predatory stares her existence for far too long. I require more than mere survival, Mr. Rawlins. I require an opportunity, a fresh canvas. She drifted toward the window, gazing out at the darkened street. I need people to perceive me as something other than this. A protracted silence hung in the air. Jessie watched her, his own defenses slowly eroding. He hadn't pondered her aspirations, her needs beyond basic necessities. Blinded by his own predicament, he'd overlooked her humanity, her own dreams, however suppressed. What manner of opportunity are you seeking, Miss Sinclair? He asked, his voice gentler now. Annie turned back, a spark of aspiration in her eyes. Respectability, a place within society, a chance to demonstrate that I'm more than just a chanteuse. She paused, a shadow flitting across her features. I left a life behind, Mr. Rawlins, a life I cannot revisit. This isn't a life, it's merely an existence. She swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. I desire a home, Jessie, a true home. The use of his given name, uttered with such fragility, resonated more powerfully than any accusation. He perceived then, with startling clarity, the depth of her yearning, the aspirations masked by her sharp tongue. He realized, with a certainty that astonished him, that he couldn't offer merely a business deal. He had to offer something more substantial. "All right, Annie," he conceded, drawing closer. "Here's my counter-proposal. We wed. We convince the community of its authenticity. You gain the respect you crave, a new beginning, and I retain my ranch. But it won't be a charade. We will treat one another with respect, as partners. And when the year concludes, we both hold the power to decide our future." Annie scrutinized his eyes, searching for any hint of deceit. She found only sincerity, a desperate hope mirroring her own. "And if we are incompatible?" Jessie hesitated, the truth a painful sting. "Then we separate amicably. I will ensure your security. You will never be compelled to perform in a saloon again." Annie nodded slowly, the enormity of the decision settling upon her. It was a perilous gamble, a leap of faith. But the alternative was stagnation, trapped in a life she abhorred. She extended her hand. "Agreed. But there's one caveat, Jessie Rawlins." He clasped a hand, his grip steady. "Which is?" "No falsehoods, no hidden agendas. We commence this venture with candor. Can you vow that?" Jessie gazed into her eyes, beholding the vulnerability and the strength that coexisted there. He knew it would be challenging. He was a man of few words, a man who buried his emotions deep. But for Annie, for this chance at preserving his heritage, and perhaps, just perhaps, discovering something unexpected, he would endeavor. "I vow," he said, his voice roughened by emotion. "No falsehoods, no hidden agendas." Rosie, remaining wary, advanced. I'm keeping a close watch, Rawlins. Harm her, and you will answer to me. Jesse nodded. Understood. He turned back to Annie, a faint smile gracing his lips. So, Mrs. Rawlins, shall we return home? The dress, a simple sky blue calico, was a far cry from the sequined splendor Annie once commanded on stage. Martha Olson, usually a woman of brisk efficiency, had fussed over its creation with uncharacteristic tenderness. Something borrowed, she'd announced, fastening an antique lace brooch to the bodice. From my own wedding, for a lifetime of joy like mine. The offered smile Annie managed felt brittle. The brooch swayed a heavy counterpoint to hopeful sentiment. Happiness felt impossibly distant. Jesse, ramrod straight in his somber suit reserved for funerals and the occasional supply run, looked as if he were already mourning. Hank Miller cuffed him lightly on the shoulder, his leathery face creased with concern. You all right, Jesse? You look like you're facing a firing squad, not a wife. Jesse forced a grin. Just a little overwhelmed, Hank. This whole shebang. Hank's nod was knowing, sympathetic. A huge step, son, but the right one. For the land. Doc Henley's office served as their makeshift chapel, a cramped space thick with the aroma of aging paper and bound legal volumes. Aside from Hank and Martha, a smattering of townsfolk had deigned to attend, their expressions a study in mingled curiosity and judgment. Annie entered, chin lifted, though Jesse noticed her trembling hands. Doc Henley, ill at ease playing parson, cleared his throat and launched into the vows. The words echoed with emptiness, hollow promises of devotion exchanged between near strangers. Do you, Jesse Rawlins, take Annie Sinclair as your lawfully wedded wife? The silence amplified Doc Henley's question. Jesse met Annie's gaze, a vast, searching blue. He saw past the saloon singer's facade to a woman craving a clean slate, an escape from her past. He saw a mirror of his own yearning, his own quiet desperation. I do, he affirmed, his voice surprisingly steady. And do you, Annie Sinclair, take Jesse Rawlins as your lawfully wedded husband? A hesitation flickered in Annie's eyes as she glanced at the onlookers. Then, locking eyes with Jesse, a spark of resolve ignited within her. I do, she breathed, scarcely audible. Doc Henley declared them bound, the pronouncement hanging like an unanswered plea. Jesse took Annie's hand, a hesitant touch. It was icy, yet her grip possessed a surprising strength. As they turned to face the meager assembly, Martha Olson stepped forward, her eyes brimming with tears of joy. Now, let's celebrate. The saloon, hosting the reception, presented an odd juxtaposition of strained gaiety and discomfort. The customary boisterousness was muted, replaced by a palpable awkwardness. A scratchy record spun to life, and Jesse found himself guiding Annie onto the dance floor. He held her at arm's length, his hand barely grazing her waist. She tilted her head, questioning. Relax, Jesse, she murmured, her breath warm against his ear. We need to sell this, remember? He eased his grip, allowing her to lead. She moved with an unexpected grace, her body swaying in time with the music. He found himself drawn in, captivated by her warmth, the delicate texture of her skin. The scent of lavender drifted from her, a welcome contrast to the saloon's usual stale blend of stale beer and tobacco. You clean up real nice, Miss Sinclair, he blurted, the words slipping out unbidden. A genuine smile bloomed across her face, transforming her features. And you, Mr. Rawlins, are surprisingly charming when you're not glowering. They danced in comfortable silence, the music filling the space between them. A strange connection sparked. a tacit understanding of their shared predicament. They were both using each other, both grasping for an escape. Yet beneath the surface, something nascent stirred, something he couldn't quite name. As the melody concluded, he released her hand, a pang of disappointment echoing within him. The fragile enchantment shattered. They were once again simply Jessie and Annie, the reluctant couple, bound by an agreement, not affection. He caught Hank's eye across the room, a knowing glint in his expression. Jessie averted his gaze, suddenly feeling exposed, vulnerable. This pretense had only just begun, and its destination remained shrouded in uncertainty. He only knew that his heart, which he believed long dormant, had begun to thrum once more. That realization terrified him more than any potential loss of the ranch. Life on the Broken Spur the buckboard, protesting with every rut in the neglected track to the Broken Spur, vibrated beneath Annie. Her grip on the worn seat tightened with each jarring bounce. The gate, once a proud marker, now leaned like a weary sentinel, half detached from its post. Beyond, the main house presented a picture of faded grandeur. Flaking paint clung to the timbers, and the porch sagged like a defeated smile. This was a far cry from the idealized, unspoken promises of Jessie's courtship. He drew the wagon to a dusty stop, his movements betraying an uncharacteristic stiffness. "Welcome," he offered, the words strangely muted. Annie managed a smile, accepting his calloused hand. The ground crunched beneath her boots as she took in the dilapidated barn, missing shingles like missing teeth, and the sagging corrals. A wave of disappointment threatened to engulf her. "Each requires attention," she offered, a vast understatement. Jessie raked a hand through his already unruly hair. "More than I let on. I apologize, Annie. I feared you'd reconsider." She met his gaze, seeing the burden etched into the lines around his eyes. This was a man shouldering a crushing weight. "I didn't expect a palace, Jessie. I came to help." The initial days dissolved into a haze of grime, aching muscles, and persistent setbacks. They tackled the most urgent tasks, clearing the yard of debris, patching the roof against the elements, striving to make the house minimally habitable. Each accomplishment unearthed a new challenge. The well yielded only a trickle, the pump seized with rust. Weeds had choked the fields into submission. Jessie, hardened to physical labor, attacked the work with stoic resolve. Annie, however, found herself out of her depth. Her fingers, once adept at gliding across piano keys, were now red and swollen from unfamiliar tools. She stumbled repeatedly, struggling with heavy pails. One afternoon, attempting to mend the dilapidated fence, she misjudged a swing and hammered her thumb instead of the nail. A sharp cry escaped her lips as she dropped the tool, cradling her throbbing hand. Jessie was instantly at her side, his face etched with concern. "Are you hurt badly?" he asked, gently examining the injury. Tears welled in Annie's eyes, blurring her vision. "I can't do this, Jessie," she confessed, her voice thick with despair. "I'm not strong enough. This life isn't for me." He knelt, taking her hands in his. "Don't say that," he urged softly. "You're tougher than you realize. This is hard for both of us. We'll find a way, together." He fashioned a makeshift bandage from a clean scrap of cloth, his touch lingering as he secured it. A surprising warmth bloomed within her. Looking at him, truly seeing him, she recognized not just a desperate rancher, but a man possessing a fundamental decency. The following morning, Annie surprised him. While he wrestled with a recalcitrant plank, she appeared, toolbox in hand. "Show me," she said, her voice steady. Jessie hesitated, then explained the problem he was encountering. To his astonishment, Annie quickly analyzed the situation and offered a solution. It emerged that her father had been a master carpenter, and she had spent countless hours as a girl in his workshop, observing and absorbing. With her guidance, they repaired the fence section in a fraction of the time it would have taken him alone. As days bled into weeks, Annie discovered a hidden wellspring of resilience. She mastered milking the cow, tending the chickens, even navigating horseback, albeit somewhat awkwardly. She found a profound satisfaction in the demanding, honest work, a purpose absent in the smoky, boisterous saloons of her past. One evening, perched on the porch, as the setting sun splashed the sky with vibrant hues, Annie turned to Jessie. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with heartfelt gratitude, "for this opportunity." Jessie met her gaze, his eyes radiating a warmth that quickened her pulse. "Thank you," he responded, "for not giving up on me, or this place." He paused, then added, his tone softening, "You're making a genuine difference, Annie, more than you comprehend." The air hummed with unspoken feelings. They sat in comfortable silence, punctuated only by the rhythmic chirping of crickets in the nearby fields. Annie felt an undeniable connection to Jessie, a bond forged through shared adversity and burgeoning respect. It wasn't yet love, but it was something substantial, something precious. And she realized, with growing conviction, that their pragmatic arrangement was slowly, inexorably, evolving into something far more profound. The broken spur remained damaged, but maybe, just maybe, it could be restored. And in that restoration, perhaps they could be too. Sharing secrets, the embers in the hearth glowed like dying stars, casting long dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls of the cabin. Jessie sat across from Annie, the silence thick with unspoken words, the weight of their unusual arrangement pressing down on them both. Supper had been eaten, the dishes washed and stacked, yet neither seemed ready to retreat to their separate corners of the small space. "Pa always said this ranch was in his blood," Jessie finally said, his voice low, almost a murmur. He stared into the fire, seeing not the flames, but ghosts of memories flickering there. "Said he could feel the land breathing, could hear it whispering secrets. I never understood it, not really until—" He trailed off, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Until now. Until he faced losing it all. Annie watched him, her gaze soft, understanding. She'd seen that same haunted look in the eyes of men who'd lost everything, men who'd sought solace in the bottom of a whiskey bottle. "What kind of secrets?" she asked gently, prompting him to continue. Jessie shrugged, a weary gesture. "Just stories, I suppose. Stories of hardship, of triumph, of love and loss. He used to tell them to me when I was a boy, sitting right here by the fire, said the land remembers everything." He chuckled humorlessly. "Guess it remembers me failing it too." Annie reached across the small gap between them, her hand briefly covering his. Her touch was warm, a spark in the encroaching darkness. "You haven't failed it, Jessie. You're fighting for it. That's more than most would do." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the saloon singer trying to reinvent herself, but a woman with a strength that belied her delicate features, a woman who, against all odds, was standing by him. He pulled his hand away, the warmth of her touch lingering. "It ain't your fight, Annie. You didn't sign up for this." "Maybe I did," she replied softly, her gaze unwavering. She took a deep breath, the firelight dancing in her eyes. "I saw things, heard things in that saloon. Things a woman shouldn't have to see. Things I don't like to talk about." Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible above the crackling fire. There was this one man, powerful, influential. He thought he could have anything he wanted, anyone he wanted. He tried to take something from me I wasn't willing to give. She paused, swallowed hard, the memory clearly painful. When I refused, he made sure I paid for it, ruined my reputation, made it so I couldn't get work anywhere decent. Jesse's jaw tightened, his fists clenching. He could only imagine the horrors she'd endured. The anger coiled inside him, a protective instinct rising to the surface. Annie saw the anger in his eyes and quickly added, "It's in the past, Jesse. I got away. I survived." But the tremor in her voice betrayed the lingering pain. That's part of why I agreed to this. To get away from all that. To have a chance to build something new, something respectable." He understood then. He understood the desperation in her eyes, the fierce determination to leave her old life behind. He, too, was desperate for a second chance. They were both clinging to the hope of a better future, however improbable it seemed. He leaned back in his chair, the fire casting his face in shadow. "We're a pair, ain't we? Both running from something." Annie managed a weak smile. "Maybe we're running towards something too." The silence returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't the silence of strangers bound by a contract, but the silence of two people who had glimpsed each other's souls, who had shared a piece of their pain. Jesse rose and walked to the window, staring out at the vast, dark expanse of the land. The wind howled outside, a mournful sound that echoed the ache in his heart. He felt a presence behind him and knew it was Annie. "It's a long road ahead," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "We'll walk it together," Annie replied, her voice soft but firm. He turned to face her, saw the unwavering resolve in her eyes. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. He had a partner, a friend, someone who understood the weight of the past and the hope for the future. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could save the Broken Spur. And maybe, just maybe, they could save each other. The arrival of Blackwood dust billowed like a malevolent spirit as a black carriage, pulled by 4 equally black horses, crested the small rise leading to the Broken Spur. The air seemed to thicken, the bird song to cease. Silas Blackwood had arrived. He stepped down with a practiced air of disdain, his polished boots crunching on the dry earth, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the rough-hewn landscape. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over the ranch, taking in the weathered buildings, the struggling fields, the very air of desperation that clung to the place. Jesse, who had been mending a fence, straightened, his jaw tightening. He recognized the carriage. He'd seen it once before, parked outside the bank in town, its presence a harbinger of ill fortune. He tossed the hammer aside and strode towards Blackwood, his boots kicking up dust devils of their own. "Blackwood," Jesse greeted, his voice a low growl. "What brings you to my ranch?" Blackwood's lips curled into a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Rawlins. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about our arrangement." He gestured around with a dismissive wave of his hand. "A rather picturesque piece of property you have here. Pity you're about to lose it." "This land has been in my family for generations," Jesse retorted, his fists clenching at his sides. "It's not going anywhere." "Sentimentality is a luxury you can't afford, Rawlins. The bank's getting impatient. And I, naturally, am eager to expand my holdings." Blackwood extracted a crisp white handkerchief from his pocket and dabbed at his brow, as if the very air of the ranch was offensive. Unless, of course, you have the funds to settle your outstanding debts? Jesse's silence was answer enough. Blackwood's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed a little too sharp, a little too predatory. I thought not. I've come to offer you a final opportunity. Sell to me now, at a reduced price, of course. And perhaps I can be persuaded to be generous in allowing you to remain on the property as a caretaker. Get off my land, Blackwood, Jesse spat, his voice laced with barely contained fury. You're not welcome here. Blackwood chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Temper, Rawlins. You wound me. I'm only trying to be helpful. Think of it as a forced retirement. You're clearly not suited to this life. He paused, his gaze sweeping over Jesse's worn clothes and calloused hands. Some men are destined for greatness. Others are destined to fail. I'll see you in hell before I let you take this ranch, Jesse vowed, his eyes blazing with defiance. At that moment, Annie emerged from the house. She'd been hanging laundry, the bright colors of the linens a momentary splash of vibrancy against the drab landscape. She'd heard the raised voices, the unmistakable tone of confrontation. She walked towards them, her steps hesitant but determined. Jessie, is everything all right? She asked, her voice soft but firm. Jesse turned to her, his expression softening slightly. Annie, this is Silas Blackwood. Blackwood, this is my wife, Annie. Blackwood's eyes flickered over Annie, a flicker of surprise, then a calculating gleam. Wife? Well, Rawlins. You certainly have been busy. A wife in a failing ranch. Quite the predicament. He turned his attention back to Jesse, his smile returning, now laced with a hint of amusement. Perhaps your wife can persuade you to see reason. After all, she wouldn't want to see her new Homa repossessed. Annie's eyes widened, understanding dawning. She looked from Jesse to Blackwood, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The desperation in Jesse's eyes, the sudden marriage, the looming threat in Blackwood's words. It all made sense now. Jesse, she said, her voice barely a whisper. What's he talking about? Jesse hesitated, his gaze shifting from Annie to Blackwood and back again. He knew he couldn't hide the truth from her any longer. I owe the bank a lot of money, Annie. Blackwood holds the note. The color drained from Annie's face. She stared at Jesse, her eyes filled with a mixture of shock, betrayal, and a dawning realization of the enormity of their situation. The second chance she so desperately craved was hanging by a thread, tied to a man who was drowning in debt and a ruthless predator who was circling like a vulture. Blackwood watched them, his smile widening, savoring their discomfort. He had come to claim his prize, and he wasn't about to leave empty-handed. The game, he thought, had only just begun. Debts and desperation, the dust swirled around Jesse's worn boots as he stood beside Annie in the livestock pen, the morning sun doing little to warm the chill that had settled deep in his bones. He watched as Jedediah, a local rancher known for driving a hard bargain, circled a scrawny heifer, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. Ain't much meat on her, Rawlins, Jedediah finally drawled, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. $1.25. Jesse clenched his jaw. $1.25 wouldn't even buy a bag of flour, let alone make a dent in the mountain of debt Blackwood was holding over his head. She's worth more than that, Jedediah. She's a good breeder. Jedediah shrugged. Good breeders need good feed. And judging by the looks of this spread, you ain't got much of that. He moved on to the next animal, a sway-backed mare that had seen better days. $1.50 for the mare, take it or leave it. Annie stepped forward, her voice surprisingly firm. These animals are worth more than you're offering, Mr. Jedediah. They've been well cared for. Jedediah chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Well cared for? Lady, you're living in a dream world. He looked at Jessie, a glint of something unreadable in his eyes. Seems you got yourself a fancy wife, Rawlins. Too bad she don't know the first thing about ranching. Jessie's hands curled into fists, but he forced himself to stay calm. He couldn't afford to alienate the only potential buyer in a 50-mile radius. We need a fair price, Jedediah. We're not asking for charity, just what they're worth. Jedediah shook his head, his face set in a stubborn mask. That's my offer. Take it or leave it. He turned to leave the pen. Don't wait too long, Rawlins. Word's getting around about your difficulties. As Jedediah disappeared down the road, Jessie kicked at a clod of dirt, frustration boiling inside him. Damn it all, he muttered. Annie placed a hand on his arm. Jessie, maybe there are other options. I have some acquaintances in town, people who might be willing to invest. Jessie looked at her, skepticism etched on his face. Invest? In a failing ranch? Annie, be realistic. I know some people with resources, she insisted, her chin lifting slightly. They might see potential where others don't. He wanted to believe her. He truly did. But hope had become a dangerous luxury, one he couldn't afford. He sighed, the weight of his situation pressing down on him. It's worth a try, I suppose, but don't get your hopes up. Later that evening, after a long day of back-breaking work, Jessie found Annie sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers spread out before her. She looked up as he entered, her expression a mixture of determination and worry. I spoke to a few people, she said, her voice hesitant. They weren't exactly lining up to throw money at us. Jessie slumped into a chair, the knot in his stomach tightening. I told you. But one of them, Annie continued. A man named Olson, he might be interested. He owns the mercantile, and he has some connections. Olson? Jessie frowned. He's a shrewd businessman. What's in it for him? He didn't say, Annie admitted. But he wants to meet with us. Tomorrow. Jessie ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. Olson was their only hope, but he didn't trust the man. What did you tell him about us? Annie hesitated, her eyes darting away. I told him we were a newly married couple trying to make a life for ourselves. Jessie's anger flared. You told him what? Annie, this is a business arrangement, not some romantic fairy tale. I know that, she snapped, her voice rising. But what else was I supposed to say? That we're only married to save your damn ranch? Yes, Jessie shouted, standing up and pacing the small kitchen. Because that's the truth. And people like Olson can smell a lie a mile away. So, what would you have me do, Jessie? Annie asked, her voice trembling. Just give up? Let Blackwood take everything? No, Jessie said, his voice softer now. But I can't stand the thought of you. He stopped, unable to articulate his fear. Of me what, Jessie? She pressed, her eyes searching his. Being used? Being seen as something I'm not? He looked away, guilt twisting in his gut. He had dragged her into this mess, forced her to play a role she didn't want. I don't want you to get hurt. Annie stood up and walked towards him, her hand reaching out to touch his cheek. I'm not afraid of getting hurt, Jessie. I'm afraid of not trying. Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a promise. He looked into her eyes, seeing the same fear and desperation reflected in his own. And in that moment, he knew that they were in this together, for better or for worse. "Okay," he said, his voice hoarse. "We'll meet with Olsen, but we'll do it my way." The aroma of aged spirits and milled wood dust greeted Annie as she re-entered the Golden Spoon. It seemed an age since she'd commanded that stage, her voice soaring with youthful ambition. "Now," she returned, not as a star, but seeking aid. Rosie, behind the polished bar, scrutinized her with shrewd eyes. Annie approached with trepidation. "Rosie? A word?" A glass landed with a muted chime. Rosie's face remained impassive. "Maybe. Words carry a price around here, Annie." Annie steeled herself. "It concerns Jessie the Broken Spur." Rosie's gaze sharpened. "That man spells trouble. Saw it plain as day. What's he gotten into now?" Annie hesitated, wary of triggering Rosie's fierce protectiveness. "He needs backing. The ranch is faltering. I think I can help, but I require an introduction. Someone Henderson trusts." Rosie scoffed. "Henderson? That miserly old buzzard? Why would he lend you a nickel, let alone enough to resuscitate a failing ranch?" "He respects your judgment, Rosie. He knows you're a woman of your word. If you tell him I'm a safe bet." Annie's voice softened, her plea evident. Rosie's sharp gaze bored into her. "And what's in this for you, Annie, besides getting mired in that cowboy's predicament?" Annie glanced at her work-worn hands, a stark contrast to her former life. "A chance, Rosie, to cultivate something lasting. A place to call home." Lifting her gaze, her voice gained resolve. "A life beyond singing for tips." Rosie contemplated her in silence, concern clouding her features. At last, she relented with a sigh. "Fine, Annie, I'll speak to Henderson. But if Rawlins lays a hand on you—" She trailed off, the unspoken warning heavy in the air. Back at the ranch, Jesse patched a fence, his movements listless, his posture defeated. From the porch, Annie observed him, the descending sun painting elongated shadows across the parched earth. She'd kept her scheme to herself, wanting assurances first. "Jesse," she called out. He straightened, wiping grime from his forehead. "What is it?" She walked toward him, her pulse quickening. "I think I might have found a potential lender." His expression remained unchanged, guarded. "Who? Olsen?" His tone held suspicion. "No, Mr. Henderson from town. Rosie is willing to vouch for us." Jessie stared dumbfounded. "Rosie? Why on earth would she do that?" Annie shrugged, striving for nonchalance. "She believes in me." Jessie snorted derisively. "Believes in you? Annie, you've barely known her." "And Henderson?" "He's a stone-hearted businessman." "What makes you think he'll just open his coffers based on Rosie's word?" "It's worth exploring, isn't it?" Annie retorted, her voice rising in pitch. "We're out of viable alternatives." Jesse looked at her, his eyes reflecting a mix of disbelief and a nascent glimmer of hope. He raked his fingers through his hair, his jaw clenched. "I don't like it. Being beholden, especially to a man like Henderson." "It's not a handout, Jessie," Annie insisted, her voice sharp. "It's an investment. Will we pay it?" He sighed, the fight seemingly extinguished. "All right, Annie, fine. But if this implodes—" The sentence remained unfinished. The following morning, they rode toward town together, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Annie could feel Jesse's anxiety radiating from him in waves. He remained taciturn, his focus unwavering on the path ahead. Rosie awaited them at the Golden Spoon. She offered a curt nod to Annie and ushered them to Henderson's office, a confined, stuffy space above the general store. Henderson, a gaunt man with thinning hair and watchful eyes, sat behind an overladen desk. Rosie took the lead, outlining Annie's proposition in a confident, persuasive tone. Henderson listened intently, casting occasional skeptical glances at Annie and Jessie. Finally, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "I've known Rosie a good while," he stated, his voice gravelly. "She's a stand-up woman. But this is a considerable sum. What security can you offer?" Jessie stepped forward, his voice steady but subdued. "The ranch. It's all I possess." Henderson arched a brow. "The Broken Spur? Its value has dwindled considerably." "It will improve," Annie interjected, her voice ringing with conviction. "We'll restore its worth." Henderson scrutinized them both for a long moment. "Very well," he conceded at last. "I'll consider it. But I expect my funds returned, with interest. And Rosie will co-sign, guaranteeing the debt should you default." He quoted an amount, an exorbitant rate that caused Jessie to wince, but Annie nodded, her eyes sparkling with determination. "We have an understanding." During the ride back to the ranch, a wave of deliverance washed over them. They were granted a reprieve, a tangible opportunity. Jessie turned to Annie, his expression softer than she had previously witnessed. "Thank you, Annie," he said, his voice rough. I'm at a loss for words." Annie smiled, her spirits soaring. "Just promise me we'll persevere, Jessie, together." He reached for her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "I give you my word." The whispers began like wind-blown sand, etching away at their reputation. Jessie overheard snippets at the general store, conversations abruptly truncated at Clara. His approach, at the Golden Spoon, Annie noticed furtive glances and pursed-lip smiles, a shadow of gossip clinging to her. Blackwood's doing, undoubtedly. He was poisoning minds, isolating them to ensure the Broken Spur's demise. One fabrication portrayed Annie as a calculating opportunist, exploiting Jessie's vulnerability. Another depicted Jessie as a hopeless gambler, drowning in debt and poised to abandon Annie penniless. All falsehoods, yet potent enough to fray bonds, to sow seeds of doubt. "He's trying to suffocate us," Jessie rasped, surveying their withered garden. The sun, a brutal hammer, pounded the earth into brittle shards. Their well had inexplicably dried up, despite recent rains. Someone had intentionally blocked the spring, cutting off their lifeline. Annie knelt, sifting the arid soil through her fingers. "He wants us broken, defeated." Lifting her gaze to Jessie, her eyes burned with matching defiance. "He's wrong if he thinks we're that weak." Jessie's jaw tightened, his hands clenched. "He sees us as easy targets. Two strays clinging to a lost cause." He spat, a curse swallowed by the dust. "He's about to learn differently." Martha Olson arrived, her usually cheerful face etched with worry. She struggled under the weight of 2 water buckets, her small frame bowed. "Jessie, dear, I heard rumors circulating. Awful things. About you and Annie. I don't believe them, of course, but—" Her voice trailed off, weighted by concern. "It's Blackwood," Jessie stated, his voice like gravel. "He's spreading lies, trying to turn everyone against us." A spark of outrage ignited in Martha's eyes. "That viper. He's been slithering through town, injecting venom into every ear. Saying you were well, I refuse to repeat such filth. Disgusting lies." She thumped the buckets down. Don't fret, Jessie. There are still honest souls here. Folks who know you, who remember your family. We won't let him triumph. Annie placed a reassuring hand on Martha's arm. Thank you, Martha. It means the world. Turning to Jessie, her resolve remained unbroken. We can't let him dictate the story, Jessie. We have to show them who we truly are. Showcase what we're building here. Looking into Annie's determined gaze, a flicker of hope ignited within Jessie. He'd been consumed by fury, by the desperation to salvage the ranch, nearly forgetting what was at stake. It wasn't solely about the land. It was about the chance for renewal, about forging a genuine bond with Annie. You're right, he conceded, his voice gentler. We retaliate. We prove our mettle. His gaze swept across the desiccated garden, the barren well, the vast, indifferent sky. First, water. Then, we expose Blackwood for the charlatan he is. He drew a deep breath, the scent of parched earth filling his lungs. This is our home, Annie, and we won't surrender without a fight. As the sun bled across the horizon that evening, painting the sky in vibrant strokes, Jessie and Annie sat on the porch, watching dusk settle. The silence pressed heavily, punctuated only by the chorus of crickets. Jessie reached for Annie's hand, his work-worn fingers lacing with hers. I'm sorry you're embroiled in this, he murmured. You didn't bargain for this kind of strife. Annie squeezed his hand, a silent reassurance. I knew it wouldn't be simple, Jessie, and I'm not afraid of some trouble. Her gaze swept across the sprawling ranch, the undulating hills stretching into the distance. This place, it holds me captive. I feel like I belong here, like I've finally found my place. Tenderness bloomed in Jessie's chest, a sensation previously unknown. He regarded Annie, her resilience shining in her eyes, and realized he wasn't just fighting for the ranch. He was fighting for her. He was fighting for a future beyond his wildest dreams. We'll overcome this, he declared, conviction ringing in his voice. Together, as darkness descended, a chilling wind swept through the ranch, carrying the scent of dust and the premonition of a storm. Silhouetted against the fading light, Jessie and Annie stood side by side, a united front against a common adversary, their hearts entwined, their spirits unbowed. The battle for the Broken Spur had only just commenced, and they stood ready to confront it, together. Confrontation and fury dust devils danced around Jessie's worn boots as he crossed the square, each stride a declaration of resolve. The Broken Spur. The name echoed in the hollow chambers of his heart, and Blackwood's subtle campaign to steal it fueled a glacial rage. He spotted his adversary near the mercantile. A self-satisfied smirk plastered on his face while he poisoned the townsfolk's minds. The damage was palpable. Blackwood. Jessie's voice, a low rasp, sliced through the hum of the square. People scattered, sensing the imminent clash. Blackwood straightened, his grin widening into a predatory display. Rawlins. What a surprise. Come to surrender already, he drawled, his gaze a dismissive caress. Jessie's hands tightened restraint warred with fury. I came to order you to cease. Quit your slander. Stop trying to steal my livelihood. A harsh chuckle escaped Blackwood. Slander? I'm merely stating facts, Rawlins. You're drowning. The Broken Spur is doomed. Why drown with it when you could profit? It's more than dirt and timber, Blackwood. It's my inheritance. All that's left. The words, ragged and raw, revealed the depth of his desperation. For a fleeting instant, something flickered in Blackwood's eyes, swiftly replaced by icy indifference. Sentimentality is a luxury you can't afford, Rawlins calf. Especially not in business. He moved closer, invading Jessie's space. You're not built for this life. You're fragile. Just like your father. The words struck like a hammer blow. His father a man consumed by the ranch, ultimately broken by its relentless demands, a figure both revered and resented. Don't speak his name, Jessie rumbled, his voice trembling on the edge of explosion. Or what? Gonna weep about it? Blackwood taunted, relentless. Perhaps run home to your songbird wife? Let her croon you to sleep while the bank takes everything. That was the spark. Jessie exploded, his fist slamming into Blackwood's jaw. Blackwood staggered backward, collapsing in the dirt. A gasp swept through the onlookers, drawn back to witness the showdown. Get up, Jessie growled, chest heaving, adrenaline surging. Say it again, if you dare. Blackwood scrambled up, spitting blood, eyes burning with animosity. You'll regret this, Rawlins. Every minute of it. The brawl was a chaotic ballet of desperation and hate. Jessie, fueled by years of repressed frustration and a visceral need to protect his own, fought with a raw, untamed power. Blackwood, though surprised, was seasoned in back-alley tactics, landing a few jarring blows, grunts, curses, and the sickening thud of knuckles on bone filled the air. A shout tore through the maelstrom. Break it up. Now. Sheriff Brody shoved through the gathering crowd, his face a thundercloud. He seized Jessie's arm, dragging him away from Blackwood. Enough, Jessie. Simmer down. He started it, Sheriff, Jessie protested, voice raw. He's trying to destroy me, steal my land. Brody's gaze shifted to Blackwood, who clutched his jaw, spitting crimson. I saw it happen, Jessie. But you can't resort to violence. Not in my town. He turned to Blackwood. And you, Blackwood. I've heard the whispers. You're inciting trouble. Keep it legal, or you'll answer to me. Brody released Jessie, eyes filled with a troubled warning. Go home, Jessie. Cool off. Think about your choices. This isn't the solution. Jessie glared at Blackwood, who nursed his bruised jaw, his gaze a venomous promise. This was far from over. As he turned to leave, the weight of the broken spur pressed down on him. He had defended his pride, his inheritance. But at what expense? He felt the townspeople's gazes on his back. Pity, judgment, apprehension. He was a man fighting a losing war, and they all knew it. All except perhaps Annie. Perhaps she held some sliver of belief, and that, more than anything, steeled his resolve to fight on. A new light, the stark bedroom light, cruelly highlighted the blossoming bruises marring Jessie's face. Annie moistened a cloth in the cool basin, her touch cautious as she dabbed at the gash above his eyebrow. He flinched, a stifled sound escaping him, and she hesitated, her fingers poised above his skin. Sorry, she breathed, meeting his gaze. The vibrant blue of his eyes, usually reminiscent of a pristine alpine stream, was muddied with pain, and something deeper, something she couldn't name. It's fine, he managed, his voice a gravelly murmur. He held her gaze captive as she resumed tending his wound. The silence in the room felt oppressive, thicker even than the mingled odors of liniment and dust. She felt the keen edge of his observation, a silent interrogation that made her want to fidget, to chatter inanely, yet she held her tongue. This felt different. At last, she broke the quiet, her voice a fragile thread. He was trying to goad you, wasn't he? Blackwood. Jesse shifted, the set of his jaw tightening. He insulted my father. And you. Annie's hand faltered. He's trying to bait you, Jesse, to provoke a reaction. He succeeded, Jesse replied, a flash of anger hardening his gaze. Almost cost me everything. She met his intensity head on. But it didn't, Jesse. Not because you don't care. Because you do. You care about this ranch. About honoring your father's legacy. About protecting what you value. She paused, then carefully resumed cleaning the cut. I respect that. The air thrummed with unspoken emotions. Jesse's rough hand reached out, his fingertips brushing against her wrist, halting her efforts. His touch sent a tremor dancing along her skin, an unexpected sensation she hadn't permitted herself to entertain. Annie, he said, his voice dropping to a husky timbre. You didn't need to do this. Marry me. Stay here. She swallowed, her throat suddenly parched. I wanted to, she confessed, her voice barely carrying. I wanted a chance. A place where I could begin again. He studied her face, his gaze probing. And is that what you're discovering? She hesitated, her eyes falling to her own hands. Was she finding what she sought? Respectability, a clean slate, a sense of belonging? The reality was far more intricate than she'd envisioned. But gazing at Jesse, at the raw resolve etched into his features, the unwavering devotion he exhibited toward his land and his kin, she recognized she was finding something else entirely. Something unforeseen. She lifted her eyes to meet his once more. I'm finding something. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. What is it? She couldn't prevaricate. Not to him. Not now. I'm finding that you're a good man, Jesse Rawlins. And possess more courage than you acknowledge. A ghost of a smile played at the corners of his mouth, softening the severe lines of his face. He reached out, gently tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against the delicate curve of her cheek. And what impressions are you forming of me? Annie's pulse quickened. This was uncharted territory, a place she hadn't dared to explore before. But the expression in his eyes, the glimpse of vulnerability she witnessed there, emboldened her. I'm finding that perhaps I misjudged you, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Perhaps there's a depth to you I never fathomed. He framed her face with his hands, his thumbs gently caressing her cheekbones. Show me, he murmured, his gaze mirroring a profound yearning. The world narrowed, the universe shrinking until only they existed. The sounds of the night receded, replaced by the frantic drumbeat of her own heart. She leaned in, drawn to him like iron filings to a magnet, and tentatively brushed her lips against his. It was a delicate kiss, hesitant and unsure, yet brimming with an intensity that startled her. He responded in kind, his lips softening against hers, his hands tightening on her face. The kiss deepened, growing more urgent, more demanding. A silent recognition of the unspoken desires that had simmered just below the surface for weeks. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, the air crackled with an almost tangible energy. Annie couldn't foresee the future, the challenges that lay ahead, but in that instant, she knew something unequivocally. Her fight was no longer solely for a new beginning. She was fighting for him, for them, and that transformed everything. Loyalty and courage. The sun beat down on Annie's back, each drop of sweat a testament to her tireless work. She wrestled with a stubborn fence post, her brow furrowed in concentration. Jesse watched from the porch, nursing his still tender ribs. He saw the grit in her eyes, the set of her jaw, the way she refused to yield to the unyielding earth. It wasn't the performance he'd witnessed in the saloon. This was something real, something raw. He remembered their bargain, the cold calculation on both sides. A marriage of convenience to save his ranch, to give her a new life. Now, watching her, he felt a pang of guilt, a deep ache that resonated in his chest. He'd underestimated her. He'd seem a singer, a woman down on her luck. He hadn't seen the steel beneath the silk. Hank Miller rode up, dismounting with a concerned look. "Jesse, you shouldn't be out here," Doc said to take it easy. Jesse waved him off. "Just watchin' Annie. She's something else, Hank." Hank followed Jesse's gaze, a knowing smile playing on his lips. Always knew there was more to that woman than met the eye. "She's got the heart of a rancher, Jesse. More than some I know who were born into it." Jesse grunted in agreement. He watched as Annie finally wrestled the post into place, securing it with a practiced hand. She turned, wiping the sweat from her forehead, and caught his eye. A faint smile touched her lips. He felt a warmth spread through him, chasing away the lingering chill from his injury. Later, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Jesse found Annie by the creek, washing her hands. He approached her slowly, hesitantly. "Annie," he began, his voice rough. She looked up, her expression guarded. "Jesse, how are you feeling?" "Gutter," he said, though it wasn't entirely true. The physical pain was easing, but the emotional turmoil was just beginning. He took a deep breath. "I wanted to thank you." Annie frowned. "For what? The work? It's what needs to be done." "For more than that," Jesse insisted. "For believing in this place. In me. When I didn't even believe myself." He paused, searching for the right words. "This ranch, it means everything to me. And you're fighting for it as if it were your own." Annie looked away, her gaze fixed on the flowing water. "I told you, I needed a fresh start. This place, it's given me that. A chance to be someone else." "You already are someone else," Jesse said softly, stepping closer. "You're strong, Annie. Courageous. You don't give up. And you're good for this ranch." She finally met his gaze, her eyes searching his. "And what am I for you, Jesse?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. He knew he couldn't lie, not anymore. "You're more than just a wife in name only, Annie. You're a partner, a friend, someone I can rely on." He reached out, gently taking her hand. Her skin was rough, calloused, but her touch sent a jolt through him. "I appreciate you, Annie, more than you know." Annie's eyes softened, and a genuine smile bloomed on her face. "Thank you, Jesse. That means more to me than you can imagine." In that moment, standing by the creek, with the setting sun casting long shadows, Jesse realized that their marriage of convenience had become something far more significant. Annie hadn't just saved his ranch, she had awakened something within him, a hope he thought long dead. He was still unsure of what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't alone anymore. He had Annie by his side, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, bound not just by a contract, but by a growing respect, a deepening affection, and a shared determination to protect the Broken Spur. The return of Clara, the dust hadn't even settled from the departing stagecoach before a different carriage, far more opulent and out of place, rattled up the track toward the Broken Spur. Jesse, leaning against the porch railing, felt a knot tighten in his gut. Annie, emerging from the kitchen with a basket of freshly gathered eggs, paused beside him, her brow furrowed in question. As the carriage door swung open, a figure emerged, framed by the afternoon sun. Clara Beaumont. Jesse straightened, a complex mix of surprise and apprehension washing over him. "Clara? What are you doing here?" Clara, impeccable in a traveling suit of emerald green, offered a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Jesse, darling, it's been far too long. I heard. Well, rumors travel, even to Philadelphia. I had to see for myself." Her gaze swept past him, landing on Annie with cool assessment. "And who is this?" Jesse hesitated. "Clara, this is my wife, Annie." Clara's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of something unreadable. She extended a gloved hand to Annie, the gesture almost dismissive. "Mrs. Rawlins, how?" Unexpected. Annie, unfazed by the thinly veiled condescension, met Clara's gaze steadily. "A pleasure, Miss Beaumont, though I wasn't aware Jesse had any acquaintances planning a visit." She subtly shifted the egg basket, positioning herself slightly in front of Jesse. "Oh, but Jesse and I go way back," Clara said, her voice dripping with honeyed nostalgia. "We practically grew up together. Remember those summer days by the creek, Jesse? The picnics, the dreams we shared?" Jesse felt a flush creep up his neck. He glanced at Annie, whose expression remained neutral, though a hint of tightness around her mouth betrayed her discomfort. "That was a long time ago, Clara. Things change." "Indeed, they do," Clara murmured, her eyes lingering on Jesse's worn clothes and the weathered ranch house. "Drastically." She turned back to Annie, her voice regaining its polished edge. "So, Mrs. Rawlins, tell me, what does a saloon singer know about running a ranch?" Annie's chin lifted a fraction. "More than you might think, Miss Beaumont. I've learned that hard work and determination can accomplish quite a bit." She set the egg basket down on the porch with deliberate care. "And that, judging a book by its cover, is rarely a wise choice." Clara chuckled, a brittle sound that echoed in the stillness of the afternoon. "Touché. But surely Jesse deserves someone who understands his world, his aspirations, someone who can help him reclaim what he's lost." She took a step closer to Jesse, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Don't you think, Jesse? Don't you miss the life we almost had?" The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken promises and veiled accusations. Jesse found himself caught between the allure of the past and the reality of his present. He looked at Annie, at the strength in her eyes, the quiet resilience that had breathed life back into the Broken Spur. He saw not just a wife, but a partner, a friend, a woman who had chosen to stand by him when everyone else had turned away. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, placing a hand on Annie's arm. "Clara, I appreciate you coming all this way, but I'm afraid you've wasted your time. I have everything I need right here." His gaze met Annie's, a silent message passing between them. "Annie is my wife, and this is our home." Clara's face tightened, her carefully constructed facade cracking ever so slightly. "Is that so, Jesse? Are you truly happy living like this, or are you simply settling for second best?" Before Jesse could respond, Annie stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "Miss Beaumont, my husband has made his feelings perfectly clear. I suggest you respect his decision and find other accommodations The stagecoach returns in the morning. Clara stared at Annie for a long moment, her eyes narrowed with resentment. Then, with a final cutting smile directed at Jessie, she turned and swept back into the carriage. Very well, but don't think this is the end, Jessie. Some things are simply meant to be. The carriage wheels spun, churning up dust as it sped away, leaving Jessie and Annie standing on the porch, the silence broken only by the distant call of a hawk. Jessie turned to Annie, his expression a mixture of guilt and gratitude. "I'm sorry, Annie. I didn't expect her to show up." Annie met his gaze, her eyes searching his. "It's all right, Jessie. The past has a way of doing that. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The ghost of lavender soak wafted from Clara as she shadowed Annie into the kitchen. Annie, normally so self-possessed, now moved with a stilted, almost mechanical cadence, tackling the coffee preparation with painstaking precision. The whirring burr grinder briefly eclipsed the silence, a paltry substitute for genuine exchange. Counterside, Clara embodied poised elegance, a stark contrast that only amplified Annie's earthier demeanor. "Jessie mentioned your singing at the saloon," Clara purred, her voice a silken thread laced with challenge. Annie, back still turned, simply replied, "That's right." Her tone, clipped and unyielding, offered no further invitation. Undaunted, Clara persisted. "It must be a colorful existence." The loaded question hung suspended, heavy with judgment. With a resounding thud, Annie slammed the coffee pot onto the burner. "It's a living." Spinning around, she met Clara's gaze head-on, defiance flaring. "Unlike some, I've always had to earn my keep." Clara's smile remained fixed, though a glacial undercurrent chilled her eyes. "Of course, it's just Jessie always favored such refined pleasures." She let the words linger, a subtle dart aimed squarely at Annie's heart. Before the ranch declined so drastically, he often reminisced about returning to Philadelphia, a life brimming with art and music, things I imagine hold little appeal here. Annie's jaw flexed. "Jessie's his own man. He determines his path." The words, however, rang hollow, betrayed by a tremor that racked her hands as she reached for a mug. Closer now, Clara's voice lowered to a conspiratorial murmur. "Did he mention our engagement?" The query struck Annie like an uppercut. She recoiled, nearly toppling a precarious stack of plates. "Engagement?" The word escaped as a strangled croak. A practiced sorrow filled Clara's eyes as she nodded. "It was ages ago, naturally, before everything unraveled." A theatrical pause for maximum impact. Before the ranch's fortunes soured, before he was compelled to make certain accommodations. Annie gaped, the color leaching from her face. The purported truth hung oppressively in the air, a venom tainting the nascent trust she and Jessie had painstakingly cultivated. He never breathed a word. Her voice dwindled, choked by disbelief. Clara sighed, a portrait of regret. "I suspect not. Hardly a source of pride now, is it? Trading a life of culture and sophistication for this." A dismissive wave encompassed the modest, time-worn kitchen. "And you." At that moment Jessie entered, drawn by the palpable static permeating the room. He halted abruptly, eyes darting between the two women, his expression hardening as he took in the tableau. The air thrummed with unspoken recriminations and suppressed animosity. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice strained with barely leashed ire. Annie pivoted toward him, her gaze searching, pleading for some shred of denial, some semblance of reassurance. His eyes, however, were averted, shame clouding his features. He couldn't meet her stare, his guilt a heavy, undeniable presence. Clara glided forward, laying a possessive hand on Jessie's forearm. "We were simply exchanging pleasantries," she cooed, her voice a syrupy confection. "Reliving old times." Jessie visibly recoiled from her touch, subtly distancing himself. "Clara, I think it's best if you—" His voice trailed off, unsure how to proceed, caught in the cross-currents of his past and present, the woman he once cherished and the one he had grown to depend on. Annie watched, her heart fracturing with each protracted second. The hope she had dared to cultivate, the dream of a genuine connection with Jessie, lay splintered into shards, leaving her exposed and utterly vulnerable. She had allowed herself to believe, to trust, and he had violated that trust in the most profound way. "Leave," she whispered, her voice barely audible, yet raw with a piercing pain that sliced through the charged air. Jessie swung to face her, his eyes brimming with contrition. "Annie, let me explain." "No," she cut him off, shaking her head. "Just to go." She couldn't bear to witness the truth reflected in his gaze. He had made his choice, and that choice spoke volumes. After a moment's hesitation, Jessie turned and retreated from the kitchen, abandoning Annie to Clara's presence and the reverberating echoes of the past. A triumphant smirk played upon Clara's lips as she watched him depart. The seed of mistrust had been sown, and now she would nurture its growth, slowly poisoning the bond between Jessie and Annie until only bitterness and remorse remained. Torn between two worlds, Jessie cornered Doc Henley behind the mercantile, where he was fiddling with his buggy wheels. The set of Doc's shoulders, however, spoke of anxieties beyond mere mechanics. "Doc," Jessie began, his voice gravelly. Sleeplessness had etched itself into him. A constant loop of Clara's cutting words and Annie's wounded silence. Doc startled, nearly fumbling his wrench. "Jessie, didn't see you. What's up?" Jessie hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "I need to talk." Doc scrubbed his hands on a greasy rag, brow creased with concern. "About yesterday's unpleasantness?" "Oh, about everything," Jessie confessed, leaning against the buggy. The wood offered a meager coolness against his feverish skin. "Clara, she resurrected things I thought long dead, dreams I double. Shelved." Doc sighed, the sound heavy with understanding. "Jessie, those were different days. You were a different soul." "Was I?" Jessie's gaze drifted, unfocused. "Or am I just playing a part now? Trying to be someone Annie deserves?" The question lingered, heavy with self-doubt. A hand settled on Jessie's shoulder, firm and grounding. "Annie sees the man you are now, Jessie. The one battling for his land, for what's to come. Don't let specters from the past snatch that away." The counsel, though welcome, had a bitter edge of truth. Later, he found Clara by the creek, ostensibly capturing the vista in her sketchbook. Sunlight kissed her hair, turning it into a river of molten gold, just as he recalled. "Jessie," she breathed, her tone laced with a nostalgic melody. "It has been too long." He merely nodded, unable to hold her gaze. "Philadelphia, we could have built something there," she murmured, her fingers delicately tracing the bark of a nearby tree. "A life, truly lived, with art and music, not this." Her sweeping gesture encompassed the ranch, her face a complex mosaic of pity and disdain. He took a seat beside her, the phantom of their shared ambitions a palpable pang in his chest. He conjured the echoes of concert halls, the hushed reverence of art galleries, a sense of belonging to a world far grander than the grit and sweat of the Broken Spur. "I thought that was my desire," he admitted, a bare whisper. And now, she probed, her eyes boring into his. He remained silent, his gaze arrested by the creek's surface, mirroring the vast, restless sky. An hour dissolved in the solvent of remembered intimacies. The effortless connection they once shared a stark contrast to the brittle politeness he now navigated with Annie. A magnetic pull tugged at him, a deep longing for the road not taken, the existence he'd convinced himself he craved. As twilight descended, painting the firmament with strokes of fiery orange and regal purple, a sharp guilt clawed at his conscience. He'd surrendered to reverie, while Annie toiled, patching fences under the relentless sun, her hands roughened and marred. He'd chosen to wallow in yesterday while she was constructing their tomorrow. He discovered her in the barn, attending to a soon-to-deliver mare. The air hung thick with the earthy perfume of hay and horses, universes away from Clara's world of perfumes and polished facades. Annie didn't look up as he entered, entirely absorbed in the animal. "Annie," he murmured. She straightened, swiping her forehead with a weary hand. "Jessie, what is it?" Her voice was cool, distant, and formally polite. He moved closer, his heart aching at the vast chasm that yawned between them. I wanted to offer my help. I've got it sorted," she replied, pivoting back to the mare. He observed her for a long moment, the determined set of her shoulders, the grace in her movements. A surge of admiration mingled with a profound sense of culpability washing over him. "I'm sorry," he uttered, the words clumsy and insufficient. She paused, her hand resting lightly on the mare's flank. "For what, Jessie? Honesty about your past? Or for making me dare to dream, even for a fleeting instant, that I could be part of what comes next?" He reached for her hand, but she recoiled. "Don't," she said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Jessie, don't." His hand fell limp, defeated. "I spent the afternoon with Clara," he blurted, the confession hanging between them like a drawn blade. Annie offered no reaction, her attention riveted to the mare. "I suspected as much. I erred," he stammered. "I shouldn't have. I simply succumbed to the pull of memory." "Memories hold considerable sway, Jessie," she said, her voice devoid of inflection. "They possess the power to blind you to what's real, what stands before you." He knew the truth in her words. He'd allowed himself to be lured by the phantom of a bygone era, a past incompatible with the life he was currently forging. He had wounded Annie, and in doing so, inflicted injury upon himself. "What can I do?" he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. "How can I set this right?" Annie finally pivoted to face him, her eyes brimming with a complex blend of sadness and resolution. "I am unsure, Jessie," she whispered, her voice laced with raw vulnerability. "I truly do not know." She turned back to the expectant mare, abandoning him alone in the barn, the weight of his decisions crushing him. He remained caught between two worlds, two diverging paths, two captivating women, utterly adrift in his inability to choose. The sole certainty that remained was the agonizing knowledge that he was losing Annie, and with her, relinquishing his only chance at a future worth striving for. A question of the heart, the air inside the cramped dwelling felt heavy, poisoned by the unspoken accusations swirling between Annie and Jessie. At the window, her back a shield, Annie's rigid posture was etched in the fading light. Her meager belongings remained mostly within the carpet-bag beside the bed, a silent threat of departure. "Was it worth it, Jessie?" The question, a threadbare whisper, barely cut through the wind's mournful howl at the window panes. "Seeing her again? Endangering everything for a ghost?" Jessie shifted, the floorboards groaning beneath his weight. He longed to deny it, to conjure some placating fiction, but the unvarnished truth constricted his throat, leaving a coppery tang on his tongue. He had allowed Clara to penetrate the sanctuary they were striving to create, a space intended solely for him and Annie. It wasn't like that, he finally choked out, the phrase ringing hollow, even to himself. It was complicated, okay? Annie pivoted, her eyes flashing with emerald fire. Complicated? Is that your word for it? The way you looked at her, Jessie, the way you used to look at me, before everything became about keeping this doomed ranch afloat. He winced, the barb finding its mark. Had his gaze ever held but uncomplicated devotion for Annie? He'd been so consumed with survival, so mired in the practicality of their arrangement. He hadn't permitted himself to fully recognize the woman before him, the one who'd rekindled laughter in his desolate world. "That's not fair, Annie," he offered weakly. "I care for you. You know that. Do I, though?" She advanced, her gaze unwavering, forcing him to confront her anguish. "Or am I simply a means to an end? A band-aid on a gaping wound? Because if that's all I am, I'm wasting precious time." The threat hummed taut, a stark, unavoidable gauntlet. Losing the ranch was a possibility, but forfeiting Annie the mere contemplation sent icy tendrils snaking through him, a stark premonition of a joyless future dominated by crushing remorse. He reached for her, his hand faltering, unsure if she would shrink away. "Annie, please, don't do this. Please, just don't." She remained still, an enigma wrapped in sorrow. "Then tell me, Jessie, what am I to you? Just the woman you wed to rescue your land? Or am I something more profound?" The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, an unbearable weight. He groped for the elusive words, the ones that could bridge the abyss between them, but they remained frustratingly out of reach, lost within the labyrinth of his own conflicted emotions. How could he convey that she was the unexpected dawn after an endless night? That she was the melody that banished the specters of his past? That, perhaps, she was the sole thing now worth defending? He started to speak, but the words snagged in his throat, refusing to be spoken. He peered into her eyes, seeking a flicker of understanding, a hint of pardon, but found only doubt and torment. He stammered, the confession dying before it was born. "I honestly don't know." The admittance, stark and raw, seemed to drain her. She recoiled, her shoulders slumping in defeat, and all the fight seemed to have gone out of her. "Then I think that answers everything," she murmured, her voice devoid of all inflection. "I'll be gone by morning." Turning away once more, she retreated toward the window, her silhouette etched like a fragile promise against the deepening twilight. Jessie stood frozen, watching as the woman he had unwittingly come to cherish slipped through his fingers, leaving him marooned amid the wreckage of his choices and the chilling realization of the coming loss. Choosing love, Jessie found Clara on the porch, staring out at the bruised twilight sky. The air hung heavy with unspoken words, thick enough to choke on. He could smell the rain coming. He braced himself, the wood of the doorframe digging into his back. "Clara," he said, his voice rough, unused to speaking his heart aloud. She turned, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Jessie, I don't understand. I thought we had something." He swallowed hard, picturing Annie's face, the firelight dancing in her eyes as she sang, the way she stubbornly held on to hope even when he gave her every reason to let go. "We did," he admitted, "a long time ago. But things change, Clara. People change. He stepped closer, the distance between them feeling like a chasm. I've changed, and I'm not the man you remember. But I can see it, Jessie, she insisted, her voice pleading. That spark is still there. I know you're just scared, trapped in this situation. She gestured vaguely towards the ranch, towards Annie. He shook his head. It's not a trap, Clara. It's a choice. I'm choosing it. He reached out, gently taking her hand, his touch firm but regretful. My heart, it belongs to Annie. I can't offer you anything else. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Clara's face crumpled, the hope draining away like water from a leaky bucket. She pulled her hand away, a sob escaping her lips. I should go, she whispered, turning away, defeated. Jessie watched her go, a pang of guilt twisting in his gut, but beneath it, a sense of certainty bloomed. He knew he had made the right choice, the only choice he could live with. He found Annie packing. Her movements were stiff, mechanical, as if she were already a ghost in this house. The air in the room felt brittle, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. He leaned against the doorframe, his heart aching at the sight of her. Annie, he began, his voice barely a whisper. She didn't look up. Don't, she said, her voice tight. Just don't. He ignored her, pushing off the doorframe and stepping into the room. He closed the distance between them, reaching out to touch her arm. She flinched, but didn't pull away. I was a fool, he said, his voice thick with regret. I let fear and pride get in the way. I was so focused on saving the ranch, I almost lost what truly mattered. Annie finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, filled with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. And what's that, Jessie? Me? Am I what truly matters? Or is it just the ranch? And I happen to be the key to keeping it. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away the tears that streamed down her cheeks. It's you, Annie. It's always been you. I was too blind to see it, too stubborn to admit it. You're not just a means to an end. You're everything. He took a shaky breath, the words pouring out of him, a dam finally breaking. I love you, Annie. I love your spirit, your strength. You're everything about you. Please, don't leave. Give me a chance to prove it. Give us a chance. He watched her face, searching for any sign of hope, any flicker of forgiveness. The silence stretched, agonizingly long. He could hear the rain starting, a soft drumming on the roof, mirroring the frantic beat of his heart. Finally, Annie spoke, her voice barely audible. You love me? He nodded, his eyes locked on hers, unwavering. More than anything. More than the ranch. More than my pride. More than anything I thought I ever wanted. A tear escaped her eye, tracing a path down her cheek. But this time, it wasn't a tear of sorrow, but one of relief. A small, hesitant smile touched her lips. Prove it, she whispered. He didn't hesitate. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, holding her tight against him. He kissed her, a slow, tender kiss that spoke volumes, a promise of a future filled with love and commitment. I will, he murmured against her lips. I promise you, Annie Sinclair, I will spend the rest of my life proving it. She leaned into him, her arms tightening around his neck. Then maybe, she said, her voice filled with a newfound hope, maybe we have a chance after all. The rain intensified, washing away the dust and the doubt, leaving behind a clean slate, a promise of a new beginning. He held her close, feeling the warmth of her body against his, knowing that he had made the right choice. He had chosen love, and in doing so, he had finally saved himself. Shadows of Blackwood. The first sign was subtle. A broken window in the tack room, easily dismissed as a stray rock. But then the horses were spooked, their feeds scattered and tainted with something that smelled acrid, like burnt earth. It was Annie who found the message scrawled on the side of the barn in crude, angry letters. "Get out." Jesse stood beside her, his jaw tight, his gaze sweeping the horizon. "Blackwood," he muttered, the name a curse on his tongue. Annie placed a hand on his arm, her touch a small anchor in the rising storm of his anger. "We won't be intimidated, Jesse. This is our home now." Later that night, the real damage came. A small group of men, faces hidden beneath bandanas, rode onto the Broken Spur, firing shots into the air. They didn't hit anyone, but the message was clear. They could. They smashed the windows of the house, overturned the porch furniture, and set fire to a small stack of lumber near the barn, the flames licking hungrily at the dry wood before Jesse managed to douse them with water. He stood there, chest heaving, the smell of smoke stinging his nostrils, and saw Annie silhouetted in the doorway, her face pale but resolute. He knew he couldn't let Blackwood win. He wouldn't. The next morning, Ruth Blackwood arrived, unannounced. She found Annie tending to the chickens, her hands gentle as she scattered feed. Ruth looked around at the damage, her expression a mixture of pity and shame. "My father," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "He's not a reasonable man, Annie. He wants this ranch, and he'll do anything to get it." Annie straightened, her gaze steady. "I figured as much." Ruth hesitated, then stepped closer. "He's hired men a rough man. They won't stop at vandalism. Please, be careful." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden bird. "Take this. It belonged to my mother. She always said it brought her luck. Maybe it can help you too." Annie accepted the bird, her fingers brushing against Ruth's. "Thank you," she said softly, surprised by the genuine concern in Ruth's eyes. "He won't listen to me," Ruth confessed, her voice cracking with suppressed emotion. "But if you need anything at all, send word to Hank Miller at the saloon. He'll get it to me." Ruth turned to leave, then paused, her back to Annie. "He doesn't understand what you're doing here. He only sees what he wants to see." As Ruth rode away, Annie clutched the wooden bird, its smooth surface warm in her hand. She went inside and found Jesse cleaning his rifle, his movements precise and deliberate. "Ruth was here," she said, her voice calm. "She warned me things are going to get worse." Jesse looked up, his eyes dark with a mixture of anger and determination. "Then we'll be ready. This is our home, Annie. We'll defend it." Later, Hank Miller watched Annie from across the saloon, his gaze knowing. He saw the way she carried herself, the quiet strength in her eyes. He'd seen women like her before, women who had survived hardship and emerged stronger, their spirits tempered by the fires of adversity. He knew she was more than just a saloon singer. She was a fighter. He also knew Jesse was a fool if he didn't see it too. Jesse walked into the saloon, his presence drawing eyes. He walked directly to Hank Miller. "I need a favor." Hank raised an eyebrow. "Depends on the favor, Jesse. I need information. Anything you hear about Blackwood's plans." Hank leaned back in his chair, considering. "Blackwood's got some nasty types working for him. They ain't afraid to get their hands dirty." He paused, then added, "And Annie, She got more grit than most folks give her credit for. Jesse nodded, his gaze hardening. I know. That's why I need to protect her. Back at the ranch, as dusk settled over the Broken Spur, Annie stood beside Jesse on the porch, the rifle resting easily in her hands. The air was still, heavy with the scent of sage and the unspoken threat of violence. She glanced at Jesse, seeing the lines of worry etched on his face. We'll get through this, Jesse, she said, her voice firm. Together. He took her hand, his grip tight. I promise you, Annie, I won't let anything happen to you. The shadows of Blackwood loomed large, but in that moment, standing side by side, they were ready to face whatever came next. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. Defending the Broken Spur, the sun hadn't even thought about showing its face when the first shots rang out, tearing through the early morning stillness like a jagged rip in cloth. Jesse, already up and tending to a restless mare, swore and dove behind the water trough, the wood splintering beside him. A fusillade of bullets chewed at the ranch house, kicking up dust and shattering windows. Annie! He yelled, scrambling low to the ground, his rifle clutched tight. He risked a glance towards the house. A figure appeared at the window, rifle stock braced against her shoulder. It was Annie. He hadn't even known she could handle a gun, let alone aim one. The crack of her rifle answered the initial volley, and a yell from the approaching riders confirmed her shot found its mark. Jesse pushed himself up, adrenaline pumping. Blackwood's men, no doubt. They were making their move. He sighted down his rifle, picking off riders as they charged, their faces masked by bandanas, their intent clear. They wanted the Broken Spur, and they were willing to kill for it. Jesse, down! Annie's voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the chaos. He instinctively ducked as another bullet whizzed past, impacting the trough with a dull thud. He crawled towards the house, reaching the relative safety of the porch. Annie was reloading, her face grim, but her eyes blazing with a fierce determination he'd never seen before. How? He managed, surprised. Learned a thing or two in St. Louis, she said, a wry smile twisting her lips. Never thought I'd be putting it to use saving a ranch. She handed him a handful of cartridges. They'll try to flank us. The barn's the weak point. Jesse nodded, understanding immediately. The barn offered cover, and if they could take it, they'd have a vantage point over the whole ranch. I'll cover you. Head for the barn. Keep low. Annie didn't argue. She moved with a surprising agility, darting across the open ground towards the barn, firing as she went. Jesse laid down suppressing fire, keeping the attackers pinned down, buying her precious seconds. He watched as she disappeared into the barn's shadows, then sprinted after her, bullets snapping at his heels. He dove through the wide doorway, landing hard beside her. They're coming around back, Annie said, already peering through a crack in the wall. Trying to cut us off. Jesse swore. They were trapped. He scanned the barn, his mind racing. Straw bales, tools, old farm equipment. Then his eyes landed on a pile of loose hay near the back wall. An idea sparked. Annie, can you handle a distraction? She raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. Try me. He quickly explained his plan. It was risky, but it was their only chance. Annie nodded, a grim set to her jaw. Let's give them a show they won't forget. While Annie kept the attackers occupied with well-aimed shots, Jesse worked quickly, piling hay against the back wall and dousing it with kerosene from a nearby lantern. He struck a match, and the hay ignited with a whoosh, sending thick black smoke billowing into the air. The outlaws, caught off guard by the sudden blaze, hesitated. Jesse and Annie seized the opportunity. They burst out of the barn's front doors, guns blazing, catching the attackers in a crossfire. The element of surprise, combined with Annie's unexpected marksmanship and Jesse's intimate knowledge of the ranch, turned the tide of the battle. The outlaws, disoriented and outnumbered, began to retreat, scattering into the surrounding hills. Silas Blackwood, his face contorted with rage, was among them. He paused, leveling his rifle at Jesse, a look of pure hatred in his eyes. But before he could pull the trigger, Annie fired, the bullet striking Blackwood's rifle, sending it spinning from his grasp. He cursed, then spurred his horse, disappearing into the dust and smoke. Silence descended on the broken spur, broken only by the crackling of the burning hay and the ragged breathing of Jesse and Annie. They stood side by side, rifles still raised, watching the retreating figures until they were nothing more than distant specks on the horizon. Jesse lowered his rifle, his hand shaking slightly. He turned to Annie, a mixture of disbelief and gratitude in his eyes. I didn't know. Annie met his gaze, her expression unreadable. There's a lot you don't know about me, Jesse Rawlins. She paused, then a small smile touched her lips. And maybe, just maybe, that's a good thing. The air reeked of spent powder and the sharp coppery scent of blood. Soot-streaked and weary, Jesse braced himself against the porch post, his breathing labored. Beside him, Annie's shotgun cooled, a stark contrast to the vibrant crimson of her saloon dress. Only the whisper of flames licking at the remains of the torched outbuilding disturbed the stillness. A horse's cry then sliced through the quiet. Sheriff Brody arrived with a small posse, their faces etched with concern and resolve. He offered a curt nod. Jesse, Annie, we heard the shots. Everything all right here? We're breathing, Brody, Jesse croaked, straightening with effort. Appreciate you riding out. Brody dismounted, his boots grinding on the gravel path. Blackwood? Escaped, Annie replied, her voice devoid of inflection. But he won't get a warm welcome should he return. A ripple of whispers moved through the townsfolk, a mixture of fear and newfound respect evident on their faces. They'd witnessed Annie, the songstress, standing firm with Jesse, defending their land, revealing a resolve they hadn't suspected she possessed. Enough, Silas. A voice rang out, crisp and unexpected. Every head swiveled towards the sound. Ruth Blackwood, her complexion ashen but her gaze unwavering, stepped forward from the rear of the group, clutching a small, worn ledger. I can't stand by and watch you destroy everything any longer. Her father's face twisted in fury. Ruth, what do you imagine you're doing? Exposing you for who you are, she declared, her voice trembling with conviction. Extending the ledger toward Sheriff Brody, she added, Everything's documented here. The land grabs, the payoffs, the bullying, the whole rotten business. Brody accepted the book, his expression hardening. He scanned the meticulous entries, his eyes tracing the damning records. A collective intake of breath swept through the crowd as the scope of Blackwood's corruption became glaringly apparent. You viper, Blackwood sputtered, lunging toward his daughter, only to be intercepted by two of Brody's deputies. Silas Blackwood, Brody announced, his voice resonant and commanding. You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. Blackwood raged against the restraints, his face turning a dangerous shade of curd. Purple! This isn't over, Rawlins. Sinclair, you'll rue this day. His words echoed like a curse as they dragged him away. Jesse felt a shiver crawl down his spine despite the lingering heat. Ruth approached Jesse and Annie, her eyes brimming with regret. I'm so desperately sorry. I should have done this ages ago. Annie's expression softened, her gaze becoming gentler. You did the right thing, Ruth. It took real courage. Ruth pressed a small, time-worn silver locket into Annie's hand. It belonged to my mother. She always believed it brought good fortune. Perhaps it can help you both now. Annie hesitated, then carefully accepted the locket. Thank you, Ruth. The tide had shifted. Blackwood's stranglehold on the town was broken. At least for now. The townspeople, emboldened by Ruth's bravery and Annie and Jessie's defiance, began to rally. They organized a neighborhood watch, repaired the ravaged Broken Spur, and offered Jessie supplies and support. The Broken Spur, formerly a symbol of Jessie's potential downfall, now radiated hope, a tribute to the resilience of community and the strength of the human heart. Later, as dusk settled, painting the western sky with vibrant Cabarrot, strokes of orange and violet, Jessie and Annie sat on the porch, the silver locket nestled in Annie's palm. The sounds of the town celebrating nearby formed a soothing backdrop. I never imagined, Jessie began, his voice thick with emotion. I never thought anyone would stand with us. Annie squeezed his hand. People are full of surprises, Jessie, especially when they find something worth protecting. He gazed at her, his heart overflowing with a gratitude that defied articulation. You know, this ranch it was always just about the land to me, owning it, preserving it. But now it's about far more than just dirt, Annie finished, her eyes locking with his. It's about building something enduring, a real home, a future for us. Jessie reached out, gently smoothing a stray lock of hair from her cheek. A future, he echoed, the word tasting unfamiliar and sweet. With you. A soft smile graced Annie's lips. With me. She paused, her gaze drifting towards the horizon. But Jessie, he won't concede easily. Blackwood he'll scheme to. Retaliate. Jessie's jaw tightened. Then we'll be ready for him. We'll face him together, and this time, we have friends at our backs. He rose, drawing Annie up alongside him. The shadows deepened around them, but the fire in their eyes burned with renewed intensity. The Broken Spur had transformed into something greater than just a ranch. It represented a haven, a symbol of resistance, and a testament to the improbable connection forged in the crucible of adversity. And Jessie knew, with an unwavering conviction, that he would do whatever it took to safeguard it, and the woman who had rescued it, and him, from the very edge of oblivion. Facing the past dust motes, thick as grief, swam in the parlor's amber light, each a tiny witness to the silence, hanging heavy as a shroud. Annie perched on the settee's frayed edge, her fingers idly tracing the roses ghosting across the velvet. Jessie, a rigid silhouette against the window, offered only his back. Ruth's ledger had banished Silas Blackwood's darkness, yet exposed fault lines in their own lives, chasms they could no longer skirt. Jessie? She asked, her voice a breath. The vigil's over. He's gone. He pivoted, his face a map of exhaustion deeper than the weeks just past. Is he truly, Annie? Or have we simply caged him? Blackwood's venom seeps into every crevice of this land. And, he confessed, eyes fixed on the floorboards, perhaps into me as well. She crossed the room, halting just shy of contact. What do you mean? He raked a hand through his hair, a gesture of stark vulnerability. My father, he wasn't much better. Different tools, same brutal ambition. I watched, and I learned. His gaze, imploring, met hers. I fought it, Annie. God, I fought it. Annie framed his face with her hands. You are different, Jessie. Your heart is good. I know it. He shook his head, doubt clouding his features. Do you, Annie? Do you truly see me? You see the man who needed to secure his ranch, the one who bartered, but beneath the surface, His voice trailed off, failing to capture the dread that clawed within. Annie retreated a step, a flicker of apprehension darkening her eyes. Then reveal him, Jessie. Show me the man who frightens you so. She drew in a steadying breath. My turn. You deserve the truth, all of it. Sinking back onto the settee, she uncorked the floodgates. Years of carefully guarded memories poured forth, the tawdry glamour of the traveling medicine show, promises that glittered and dissolved, the hungry gazes that reduced her to a trinket. She painted a portrait of desperation, the gnawing loneliness. Nights poured out in song in dimly lit bars just for scraps of survival. A life danced on the precipice. A relentless quest for acknowledgement, for belonging. That's why I came here, Jessie, she concluded, her voice raspy. Not merely seeking shelter, but a chance at reinvention, at becoming someone worthy. Jessie knelt before her, cradling her hands in his. The skin, roughened and calloused, spoke volumes. Annie, he breathed, I never knew. There's more, she persisted, her gaze unwavering. The circumstances of my leaving St. Louis. It wasn't solely about singing. I became entangled with a man of influence. He dangled promises and nearly shattered me. He was already married. When his wife discovered our affair, it turned vicious. A tremor shook her. I had to vanish, disappear completely. I assumed a new name, ran as far as my legs could carry me. He tightened his grip. You don't need to say more. I must, she insisted. You ward the whole truth, so you can decide if you still desire me. He rose, drawing her up with him. Annie Sinclair, or whatever name you carried before, holds no sway over me. Only the woman before me now matters. The one who confronted Silas Blackwood without flinching. The one who ignites my yearning to be better. He paused, emotion roughening his voice. When I asked for your hand, it was to salvage the ranch. But somewhere along the line, you saved me instead. Now, it was his turn to unburden. He confessed to arrogance, to bullheaded pride, to being so obsessed with rescuing the broken spur. He'd nearly condemned himself in the process. He spoke of the burden of his father's sins, the paralyzing fear of repeating them. He shared how her presence had thawed the ice encasing his heart, how her laughter had filled the desolate spaces within. I was consumed by the dread of failure, he whispered, barely audible, terrified of losing everything. I failed to see that I possessed all I truly needed, right here, with you. Annie reached up, gently swiping a tear from his cheek. We both stumbled, Jessie. We each arrived burdened by our own agendas. But we forged something real, something far stronger than we could have conceived alone. He enfolded her in his arms, burying his face in the curve of her neck. I love you, Annie. I love your resilience, your fiery spirit, your unwavering faith in me, even when I lacked it myself. She clung to him, her own tears a warm stream against his skin. I love you too, Jessie, with every fiber of my being. Encompassed by the specters of their pasts, they discovered solace in one another's embrace. The secrets laid bare, the vulnerabilities exposed, had not cleaved them apart, but had instead forged a bond that could withstand any fear, any regret, any obstacle thrown their way. The Broken Spur was more than just a ranch. It was a haven, a place where they could confront their histories, embrace the present moment, and cultivate a future together, a future brimming with affection, optimism, and the promise of redemption. Renewed vows, Jessie stood rigidly before the scarred mirror, the unfamiliar linen shirt clinging to him like a borrowed skin. Months had passed since he'd worn anything but his working clothes. Annie had laid it out an olive branch, or simply an act of kindness, something he still struggled to accept without suspicion's shadow. He raked a hand through his hair, noticing the deeper grooves fanning from his eyes, lines etched by worry, near devastation, but also, he realized with a quote, "Jolt. I love unforeseen." From the adjacent room drifted Annie's hum, lighter than he'd heard in ages, almost effervescent. He drifted to the doorway, bracing a shoulder against the jamb. She faced her own reflection, adjusting the simple azure dress she'd sewn herself. Hardly the glittering gowns of her stage days, yet it possessed its own elegance. It whispered of quiet grit, a resilience mirroring his own hard-won strength. Nervous? He rasped, the question a touch rough. Annie turned, a gentle smile softening her features. Terrified, she confessed, the word a breath. But a good kind, I think. She closed the distance, reaching to smooth a stray lock from his brow. And you, Jessie Rawlins? Cold feet? He captured her hand, his work-worn fingers interlacing with hers. Never, he affirmed. The sound solid. Justy wanting to do this right this time. He searched her eyes, seeing his own lingering doubts reflected, but underlying it all, a profound, unwavering belief. This ain't just about the ranch. Annie, this is us. A gentle squeeze answered him. Always has been, for me, she murmured. The modest church overflowed. Neighbors, acquaintances, even faces lost to the years had arrived to witness their renewed commitment. The air vibrated with anticipation, laced with the sweet perfume of wildflowers gathered by the womenfolk, and the collective exhalation of a community holding its breath, praying for a fortunate conclusion. Doc Henley, a rare smile creasing his weathered face, stood before them. Not a preacher, not in the formal sense, but the heart of their small world, familiar with their trials, their berry-bara days, secrets, their newfound aspirations, were gathered today. Doc's voice, gravelly yet resonant, filled the space. Not to initiate, but to reaffirm. Jessie and Annie's union began out of necessity, forged in the crucible of circumstance. Yet from that initial bargain has arisen something far more profound, a love grounded in respect, understanding, and an unwavering resolve to fight for each other, and for the future they are building together. He turned his gaze to Jessie. Jessie, you arrived in these parts a fractured soul, weighed down by your father's legacy, haunted by the specter of ruin. Have you found solace in Annie's affection, and discovered a fresh trajectory, free from the darkness of the past? Jessie met Doc's knowing gaze, his heart brimming. I have, he stated, his voice ringing with conviction. Annie showed me that I am more than just the sum of my father's mistakes. She taught me to forgive myself, and to embrace love once more. Turning to Annie, his eyes shone with a tenderness he'd long suppressed. She salvaged me, Doc, pure and simple. Doc inclined his head, then addressed Annie. Annie, you sought refuge in this town, fleeing a history that shadowed your steps. Have you discovered the serenity and belonging you yearned for within Jessie's devotion? A sanctuary to finally call your own. Tears shimmered in Annie's eyes, yet her voice remained unwavering. I have, she affirmed, her gaze locked on Jessie's. Jessie offered me a second chance, the opportunity to be seen for my true self, not defined by past errors. He revealed the meaning of genuine love, cherished in a way I never knew possible. Doc's smile widened. Then, with hearts open and resolutions firm, please offer your vows. Jesse clasped Annie's hands, his palms damp with feeling. Annie, he began, his voice thick with emotion. The first time we stood here, I acted for the sake of the ranch. But now, I do this for you. I vow to honor you, to cherish you, to stand steadfastly by your side regardless of life's trials. I promise to strive to be a better man, a better husband, and to cultivate a life with you overflowing with affection, joy, and a future where we both feel secure, protected, and treasured. Annie's tears streamed freely now, yet her smile radiated brighter than ever. Jesse, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I came seeking a home, but you bestowed upon me immeasurably more. You gifted me with a family, a purpose, and a love beyond my wildest dreams. I promise to support you, to have faith in you, to forever be your partner, your confidant, and your closest friend. I vow to love you fiercely, faithfully, and unconditionally for all my days. Doc Henley pronounced them husband and wife once more. The gathering erupted in celebration, their relief and happiness tangible. Jesse drew Annie close, enfolding her in a fierce embrace. He lowered his head and kissed her. A kiss brimming with gratitude, passion, and a love forged in adversity and strengthened by unwavering trust. A kiss that sealed their destiny, a kiss that promised a future brimming with hope, and a kiss that proclaimed to the world that they were, irrevocably, together at last. A thriving future years softened the lines on Jesse's face, etching in them the wisdom and weathering of a life lived fully, a life he hadn't anticipated but now cherished. He leaned against the porch railing, the wood warm beneath his hands, watching his grandchildren chase chickens across the yard, their laughter echoing in the twilight. Annie stood beside him, her silver hair braided loosely down her back, her hand resting gently on his arm. The Broken Spur, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, was more than just a ranch. It was a testament to their resilience, their love, their unexpected journey. Remember when this whole place nearly crumbled to dust? Jesse murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Annie squeezed his arm. How could I forget? You were a stubborn fool, determined to drown in debt rather than ask for help. He chuckled, the sound a little rough around the edges. And you were a fiery songbird, trapped in a gilded cage, desperate for a chance to fly. Their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement of the past they had both escaped. He had married her to save his ranch, a desperate gamble born of necessity. He hadn't understood then the depth of her spirit, the unwavering strength that lay beneath her shimmering gowns and captivating voice. She had saved the Broken Spur, yes, but she had saved him too. He thought of the hollow ache that had resided in his heart before Annie, the bitterness that clung to him like a shroud. She had breathed life back into his soul, shown him the possibility of hope, of love, of a future he hadn't dared to dream of. A young girl, Lily, their eldest granddaughter, stumbled and fell, her cries piercing the air. Annie was off the porch in an instant, scooping the child into her arms, her soothing voice a balm to the little girl's tears. Jesse watched them, his heart swelling with a love so profound it took his breath away. He had built this life, this family, with this woman. Later, as the children were ushered inside for supper, Annie returned to the porch, her face etched with a quiet contentment. The sky was ablaze with color, fiery oranges and deep purples bleeding into the horizon. Do you ever think about it? Annie asked, her gaze fixed on the sunset. About how it all started? Jessie knew what she meant. Their agreement. The carefully worded contract, the promises of mutual benefit, the absence of love. He remembered the sterile formality of their early days, the polite distance they maintained, the careful choreography of their interactions. All the time, he admitted, turning to face her. I remember thinking I was being so clever, so practical. I thought I was using you to save the ranch. Annie smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. And I thought I was using you to escape a life I no longer wanted. We were both wrong, Jessie said, reaching for her hand. We saved each other. She laced her fingers through his, her touch sending a familiar warmth through him. I came here, seeking respectability, a place to belong. I never imagined I'd find this. She gestured to the sprawling ranch, the bustling family, the vibrant life that surrounded them. Love wasn't part of the bargain, Jessie, but somehow it became the most valuable thing of all. He pulled her closer, his arm encircling her waist. It was always you, Annie. I just didn't know it then. The years hadn't diminished their love, only deepened it, weathered it, made it stronger. They had faced hardship and betrayal, loss and heartache, but through it all, they had clung to each other, their bond forged in the fires of adversity. The Broken Spur was a testament to their love, a symbol of their unwavering commitment to each other, to their family, to the life they had built together. The air grew cooler, the last rays of sunlight fading below the horizon. Jessie held Annie close, her warmth a comforting presence against the encroaching darkness. He looked out at the ranch, at the rolling hills and grazing cattle, at the sturdy house that had become their home. It was more than he could have ever hoped for, more than he ever deserved. He had married her to save his ranch, but she had given him so much more. She had given him a life, a love, a future worth fighting for. And as he stood there, with his wife by his side and his family gathered near, he knew that their story was far from over. It was just beginning.